The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everybody to today's webinar brought to you by the MSX Group. My name is Derek Krebs. I'll spend a few minutes introducing myself and today's topic, and then the bulk of the time we're going to be looking at the application for some nice knowledge and tips and tricks. So welcome one and all. We have a large audience that is attending live, and many people are attending this also secondly through a recording. Again, my name is Derek Krebs. I'm a senior consultant with the MSX Group, and here's a little background regarding myself and the product. I've been a consultant for many, many years, going on about 30 years, and it's been a fun, interesting ride because most of the founding members at MSX Group, we started at FRX Software, headquartered out of Denver, Colorado originally, about 150 staff, and we had such great reporting and budgeting applications at FRX that Microsoft acquired us. And then our team helped develop, support, and implement those flagship products these last many, many years. And we're still supporting lots of customers on FRX and ManageReport today. And I see some of our audience members are maybe existing FRX, ManageReport, and Forecaster customers, so welcome. Secondly, I see some attendees that are current existing Prospero customers, or third, maybe some prospects, maybe either end users or partners looking to sell or deploy the product. So welcome one and all. And the fun part of my role too as a consultant is I'm working hand in hand with all these customers. I'd say close to 500 customers I've been helping implement their budgeting reporting. So I'm going to share some nice little tips and tricks to bring the easy button to those processes. Now, one thing or two finally on this introductory slide is my email. And in the GoToWebinar, if you have any questions, please submit those. And at the tail end of today's phone call, and we even have someone monitoring those throughout, I'll be fielding those, but especially for those recording, I'll be glad to field any questions or requests. One little invite that I usually conclude with, but on that last line, we'd be more than glad to do a little one-on-one demonstration. We even have a free trial version, even using your data reports. That way you can validate the power and ease of the product, because I can't tell you how many customers that come to us a few years later like, oh, we wish we came to you because we were oversold and promised this other tool that did not meet our needs. It was painful. So please do take advantage of that offering. All right, as I continue, for those people that are new to the Prospero application, it's going to be the one-stop shopping for your report and budgeting needs / forecasting as well. So that could be all your different financial reports, both general ledger and even non-general ledger data. And I'll add some more remarks to that later. And then you're going to have all the controls at your fingertips, including interactive charts and graphs, drill down to the account and transaction level. That way, when you're reviewing income statement data, you can maybe see the customer or vendor that was received or paid to all at your fingertips. And I'm probably going to quote several differentiators of Prospero. And that last bullet point is one key one, because all those years at Microsoft, we can take all of your hard work of your reports in FRX and ManageReport, including anybody that was using the Microsoft forecasting budgeting tool, we can migrate that into Prospero. That gives you a nice jump start on your implementation, and it's going to save you tons of time and money versus our competition. And how about just a few little quick notes on the reporting side? Like all of your reports, income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow. And that last bullet point, I want to emphasize that Prospero has its own data warehouse. Primarily, it's going to include your general ledger data, but you can have any data imaginable in there. Statistics like headcount, units sold, margins, budgets, just to name a few. And again, the drill down transaction level graphs, just to repeat. Now, what we did all those years at Microsoft, we took the best things in those applications and we brought them into Prospero. One key foundational item is the ease of use of reusable building blocks. And there's really three simple ones. We have a line/row, like represented there in blue. Or secondly, we have a column represented in red. And third, we have a nice reporting tree, like there at the top in green, that might be slicing my income statement by different companies or location departments. But what's great is we can reuse, let's say, that row format there in blue or line set. I can use that for 100 different reports or even budget templates. which means my setup, maintenance, and inventory is so much more efficient. We are not an Excel head, and I actually work with several of those that I do not like because you cannot reuse those building blocks. All right, so I wanted to emphasize those aspects. And half my time is helping people forward look on their budgeting and forecasting, so avoiding spreadsheet pains, or Excel hell they call it. And Prospero has great budgeting with all the bells and whistles you would expect, like detail screens for human resources, revenue, capital, and line item details. I'll illustrate those in today's phone call. You can also add some great little annotations on your reports and budgets. It does the instant consolidation, and we have those reusable row and columns. That way you just have one or a couple of templates you can use for 100 different departments or locations. All right, and there's just a quick little note about the pain points in Excel, more for the recording there. So I probably don't need to hash those out. So there's my quick little summary through the slide. And then lo and behold, that's where the Prospero fits in and brings the easy button again will be our recurring theme today. How about on this Prospero differentiators? It's going to be more for a slide on the recording. And what we're going to be doing is everybody that registered or attended live will be sending you a nice little follow-up email, including this slide deck, secondly, a nice little recording, and maybe third, some added takeaways. But there's a few little highlighted ones. Most I touched upon in the introductory little session, and a few other ones I'm going to do more conversationally as we look at the application. All right, well, thanks for your time on that introduction. That's it in PowerPoint. But maybe one other thing I want to invite you to in the future is when we look at our website, like msxgroup.com is probably how you found out about today's session. We have maybe one or two links I'll further call out here. In the top right, we're looking at upcoming events, like we're definitely in our little webinar schedule. And we have all these flagship products, including Prospero being probably our main customer base, but we're still going to be helping all of those FRX Managed Reporter and Forecaster customers as long as you continue using the applications. But they haven't been touched or service packed by Microsoft for about 10 years, but we still have hundreds we help and support on those till today. And about a week or two ago, we just held our user forums, which is held twice a year. We had one in the springtime, and then we're going to have another one in the fall, which down below is really just 2 full days of free product training. We even record those, so there's going to be links on this page that you can look to them. And if you're not on our email list or invite list, I'll pull up my contact information in that regard, especially I see a couple of people that joined the live session here moments ago. Again, this is Derek Krebs, Senior Consultant, and there's my contact information. All right, great. Let's now look at the application, which we came to see. And this, again, is going to be a mixed audience of existing Prospero customers, maybe prospects and partners. So this is a nice general overview showing those capabilities. And as I do so, let me even start with a couple of people in your organization that are going to be interacting with Prospero. One might be a CFO. Secondly, maybe an end user like a manager that has less rights outside of the accounting area. And maybe third is a power user that most attending this call are in the finance and accounting area that are in charge of the setup and maintenance of the reports and budgets. Now, what we're seeing is multiple reports as defined in a report collection that I could either see electronically in the viewer, which we're currently doing, or a second example of 3, I'm going to show you an Excel flavor, or maybe third, I'm going to show you a PDF flavor, because really that's the easy button we're going to be bringing, because most people, the challenges they're facing today is manually doing a lot of the reports and manually disseminating it, but there's automated ways to do so. All right, I'm going to circle back to some of these reports and report collections over the next few minutes, but there's at least one example of such. And I'm actually going to log in as one of our end users. I'm going to sort of start more of an isolated, simple view, but then we'll log back in as this power user view secondarily. All right. Now, however you install or deploy Prospero, thankfully you have some nice options. One might be, hey, I might install it on our computers and servers, what we call on-premise. Or secondly, you might want MSX group to host this, or maybe a third party. but at least you have some nice easy options because most of our competition might be one way and only one way. And really, the look and feel of Prospero looks the same regarding if it's on your servers or hosted by us or a third party. And even it's cloud and web-based is always a common question that most customers ask or want these days. So this, yes, is a web-enabled product. And how about me as a manager in your organization? How about you, my boss in the accounting area? You provide me 2 reports every month. And when I open up Prospero, I have a nice quick launch area of those favorites. Like I'll start with reports and charts, like here to the left, report 1, my actual versus budget. Or how about here to the right, report number 2, a nice little trailing 12-month this year, last year. Or secondly, it might be that time of year. You want me to do a budget or forecast update, and I'll get to that after we review a report. Now, when I open up this report, I actually have it open there in the background to save a little time, but I take a second to acquaint you with our demonstration database. We have multiple company, but as an end user, this user has only access to our United States company, but we'll log in as our CFO later, and we'll have multi-company. That is automatically consolidated in Prospero and through this data warehouse. Or secondly, we have locations, multiple, but this user only has access to Denver, and we simply call that security assignments. And if time permits, I'll show you a nice accounting-friendly window where I can define, like Bob or Sally, getting this location or department. And third and finally, we do have departments. And I could probably rattle off, even in this short hour, about 30 great new features that never existed in a Microsoft era or in your world today or most competition. One of those is when we look at our department, I'm going to open up the report looking at all of my departments for Denver. There's 2 ways I can see my departments. This is a list of them, like you see that numerical list, and at the very bottom a summary. But secondly, I can easily see this graphical tree. And one great thing of many in Prospero that differentiates us, apart from the rest, is this tree called All. It's automatically created and maintained. And that's going to be maybe one example of 2 or 3 trees I'll share with you. But right now that's on the department. And sure, I'm going to open up this financial looking at all my departments, which I have open here in the background already. Now, as a manager or you in the organization, I now want to review my financial data. Then secondly, I'm going to forecast or budget going forward. And here's where I'm now going to bullet point about 5 or 6 great interacting items where I can see further details behind this report data. Well, here from top to left, one might be drilling into data, including changing the drill order. Or secondly, looking at this data graphically. Or third, I'm going to drill into 2 different accounts, like a revenue account, or secondly, expense account. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all of my detail on one page to make maybe ease of reviewing that data. Continuing, I might want to change my report prompt. Instead of looking at all departments, looking more granularly. Additionally, and finally, I might want to add annotations because maybe you asked me as one of your managers to explain variances of actual to budget. So I'll annotate my report. And lastly, I'm going to export that report data out to Excel, PDF, or printer to maybe further share it with other people or do ad hoc analysis. All right, so let me go back to those 5 or 6 bullet points within the next maybe 5 minutes. First and foremost, I'm going to drill into maybe revenue and then secondly expenses. But here is sales line. I'm going to double click anywhere on that line. And what you see is another tab just got opened up. I'm going to just come here to the left where I began, or here to the right where I drilled in. Now, speaking of when I drill in and when I compare us to other products, most other applications you cannot see across multiple columns. You only see actuals only, which I despise. Some of these products are 3 or 4 times more costly than Prospero. They also take 3 or 4 times longer to implement, which not us. We have a little couple day quick start deployment. Now that's my first click, looking at all departments, but here's my sales department and marketing as I'm looking at sales data. And then here my next click is down to the transaction level. Another tab opened up, and then here's for the given month I'm looking at. These are the individual transactions, and even I can see vendor customer information, which we've hidden, but you'll have all of that at your fingertips. Or in other words, no, you do not have to be a general ledger licensed user. You just have to be a user inside Prospero. Or if not, I'll share you some other offline examples like Excel and PDF that I'll get to in just a moment if you do not have any licensed users. But we'd always recommend having a license in Prospero, meaning it's secure electronic. I'm meeting my Sarbanes-Oxley audit controls, and then you're going to have all the extra little bells and whistles I'm going to continue with. But I'm going to close out of the transaction detail. Here's my first click, which are the different departments for this one company US and one location Denver. And maybe occasionally I'm going to show a couple little tips and tricks I see for many of our existing users. That is, if I wanted to show any of my tabs or windows side by side, I simply right click and show them vertically or horizontally. So I'm just going to do vertically side by side. So there's my report to the left or the detail to the right. And this navigation pane to the left, maybe I want to collapse or bring it back out to give me more real estate room to work within. All right, great. There's my drill down to the account and transaction level. Now, secondly, what I'm going to do is instead of my manager who only has Denver and just for the US company, I'm going to go to my CFO because one of my favorite features is this button here called Change the Drill Order. Now, the only thing different is I'm now the CFO. I'm clicking on this button called Reopen the Report. Maybe two things different. First and foremost, instead of just the United States company, here's maybe a second example of trees, but this time on our company segment. So here's the multiple company. Now, this elimination company, that is a new company we just acquired last week. Or maybe I'm storing these eliminations in Excel, which I can easily pump into the data warehouse, as I gave you maybe 2 or 3 different real-world examples of maybe companies leveraging Prospero in the data warehouse for eliminations or new acquisitions. So you do not have to go through the full-blown general ledger conversion to then consolidate those. And Prospero does interface with about 40 different accounting packages and versions. So odds are that we have an interface already, or if not, we're adding new interfaces every single month on customer requests here. Now, the second thing differently amongst multiple company and locations is I'm the CFO and I have runtime settings. Like here's my report date, or maybe here we're going to eventually look at a few different output types, but I'd say 95% of the time I recommend, and I'm viewing the reports in the workspace or viewer, but otherwise I'll show you some of these other examples here moments from now. All right, so now as a CFO with multi-company and locational access, when I drill into sales, my first click from hierarchy tops down is by company. There's US and Europe. I'm going to drill into the top line for United States. Here's my second click, being the different locations. And my other user only came down to this level here just for Denver. Then the third click, yes, by department. And I can easily see some variances by. Now that's very cool, but I'm just going to close out of what I drilled into. Now your old story and our competition's story usually is you have to go to a second, third, or fourth report, what I'm about ready to demonstrate that you can do with one report efficiently in Prospero. That is this button here called Change the Drill Order. There's my hierarchy, company first, location, followed by department. I'm simply just going to drag and drop department to the top. So instead of department being my third layer or click of analysis, now when I'm drilling into this variance here, I see, now when I click, I immediately see, oh, there's department A, B, C, D, and oops, I see there's a large variance here on my marketing department 300. And now what I'm going to do is, as I sort of drilled in efficiently to see good or bad areas, I'm now going to reopen the report and I'm going to look at that specific department 300 that I found in seconds. That was my problem child. Otherwise, again, you'd have to spend many report filters and layers to see that quick analysis. And then as I conclude and trace my steps back, this button here called Change Drill Order. Great. All right, that's my and most of our customers' favorite feature that I doubt any other product does it just like we do and most robustly. All right, let me bounce back to my end user. I see 1 or 2 questions that came inside the queue and I'm about ready to address those. So I have another monitor and a team member looking at those as we speak. So thank you. For the next few bullet points, let's look at this data graphically. So this button here, display as a chart. Now out of the box, we have about 10 different graph types. And let me show you two things behind the scenes. One is, this is the CFO I was role playing with, what we call a report collection, multiple reports. So there's a nice little dashboard that maybe my CFO likes to see every morning when they log in, maybe revenue trends, etc. And then how about, let me just show you transparently behind the scenes that there's no smoke and mirrors. On this charting, I have a tab here. All I have to do for the report is turn on this check mark saying, yes, I want to have a chart being available. And then there are our many different graphical types. Versus our competition, how we stand or differentiate from the rest is, they usually say you have to be an Excel guru to do graphing. Or they say, oh, you have to buy this separate Power BI product and you have to have technical knowledge of all the tables. No, that's not our story. There's our easy graphing ability, which I always like to be transparent, just show you how easy it is, including maybe that free trial version. I'll invite those that came a little bit later in today's phone call too. All right, now second little thing on this administrator I like to call our attention to is, again, the reusable row, column, or tree. So found under the home ribbon, I'm a power user in the accounting area who's in charge of the setup and maintenance of all my reports and budgets. And I have this button here called Catalog View. Again, Prospero is not an Excel add-in that I despise because, hey, great, here's all the reports inside the system. Here's the lines. I'm even going to see who last modified it, created, and generated those. We even have a more robust activity log that even says further who modified what when, but this is a summary of that data. And I'm going to sort every report by the line set being used because, hey, here's great. Here's all these reports sharing that same row or line definition, which again means my setup and maintenance is easy because if I was in the Excel world, which again we're not, but when I use some other Excel applications that 30 years doing this, I work with still, I see just separate Excel files. I'll see no information regarding who last edited it, modified it, and where they're similar, meaning, hey, maybe these three reports use the same column structure of actual budget and variance. And if I had to change that, I'd have to open up all individual Excel files. But again, that's not our story, but a huge differentiator that I love as a consultant or our customers do. All right, I'll get off my little soapbox there, but a few little remarks looking at the administrator. Returning to my end user, this graph is also very cool, drill downable. And even I can switch back to my report view after drilling in. So here is my graph. I'm looking at my margin analysis. I'm going to drill in. Now here's my same drill method, meaning here's the different departments or companies or locations based on what layer or access you have as a user. And yeah, graphical data is pretty cool, but even better yet, I drilled into that expenses pie or node of the pie chart, and I'm going to come up here and switch to the report view. So now here is the header implies I was looking at expenses I drilled in, not revenue, and it's still broken out by the next layer down, in this case, these departments of my Denver location. And how about you on the call might be one of my coworkers. I want to come up here and share and do some ad hoc analysis with it. So here's this button called Export to Excel. It just asks me for any file name and path. I'll just keep the default there. And this is going to be 3 or 4 examples I'm going to show you literally within 1 minute's time. The first example is in Excel, one report like that income statement where I drilled in. So there's my detail that I drilled in, including all the fonts, formatting, bolding, even formulas I can have included. The second example, also in Excel, is still one report, an income statement, but notice the sheets, like here is Miami Service Department, Miami Operations, or here's San Francisco Department A, San Francisco Department B, and I could have also included the account level details to this. How about third and final example to Excel is, how about you are my board member or banker. Maybe you're not a licensed Prospero user, nor in my general ledger, you don't have to be. And then you request every month 3 reports. This is one Excel file, but here's report 1, income statement, or report 2, balance sheet, and report 3, cash flow. And that's simply a report collection as seen in one Excel file. And maybe last final example of a report collection might be what you're manually and painstakingly doing with a printer and PDF and file save as repetitively is I can do automatically the same report collection to PDF. So there's maybe reporter page 1, reporter page 2, report 3, a nice little report book I'll have now all at my fingertips. And then how about the behind the scenes on that? To be transparent is we simply have, as the power user I'm now logging into, we have this area called report collections. And then here might be a few examples we've created, but simply here's maybe report number 1, report number 2, 3, 4, and I can click on the add button, remove, and then here's all the different reports I have in the system, either in a folder tree type view, or I'm going to turn this off. Here's a list of all my reports, and I can come up here and I'm going to add maybe the cash flow, maybe a 5th report to that report group. And last little thing here, so easy to create and use, is on the output tab. I showed you 3 examples. One was in the workspace, secondly was Excel, and third, PDF. And also we have a published report area that, as my end user, the published report area is where I have a nice little final copy of reports that I store and archive over time. And I'll circle back to that. All right, and how about there again is a nice little visual of the report collection in the workspace. Or here, as I recap here in 30 seconds time, there is my Excel version, like report 1, report 2, or report 3, or saw the PDF. Now, another word that I just plugged and I'm going to return to is my end user. As I just close out these graphs I interacted with, I have a nice little published report area where I archive reports. And I can have multiple folders over time, like January, February, March, or these folders could be group driven, like here's my East Coast managers or reports, or my European reports or users. Now, what's unique about published reports area is the next bullet point I'm going to get to on how I can nicely annotate my financial reports. How about you, my boss in the accounting area? You've asked me to explain variances. I'm going to hover on top of this memo or note, and I can read that note. Or better yet, I'm going to look here to the right. We have our annotations, because here's Derek, logged in as manager 1, but here's Derek Krebs on this date and time, added this memo or note. And I'm going to come up here and add a memo or note to a second line. So how about here is a larger variance in my salary. I'm going to simply right click and annotate. And notice to the left, the little toolbar icon that I introduced moments ago here at the top. All right, and I'll say something like, thanks for joining us today on our phone call. I'll be short and sweet there. And once I click OK, same story. I can hover on top of it. And if I don't want to auto hide it, I'm just going to come up here and thumbtack to see these memos or notes. Like here's account number 1, a little bit longer note about my budget variance, or here's account or note number 2 saying, hey, thanks for joining. And maybe the last little illustration I'll do is I'm going to add a new note. Here's Derek's boss. Here's our game plan is a infamous phrase I do, as I see 1 or 2 people that have been on a session or 2 I've done in the past. But there's maybe Derek's boss explaining maybe our course of action for that opportunity or threat. Awesome. Centrally collaborating with all my users with all the details, graphs, and ad hoc analysis thereafter. Now, speaking of, I drilled into revenue earlier as I'm concluding with my bullet points. I'm going to now drill into expenses. And that was 2 separate lines, like revenue and secondly expenses on 2 separate screens. But even cooler and nice is this button here called Full Account Detail. I could then see all accounts detail all on one screen, if you wish. And that was one of our customer requests. And speaking of customer requests, I'll do a little tangent here in just a second on that. But here is my detail for sales. Here's my detail for cost of goods sold. Here's my detail for salaries, et cetera, as I just continue downward. There's office expense in the details, and I could have even gone down to the transactions. All right, let me Close that out. And there's me circling back. Full account detail, meaning all lines detail in one screen if you wish. Change report prompt. We saw that earlier, meaning where I just came up here instead of looking at all my departments and drilling in, I saw the variance logged in as a CFO, looking at and based off my security assignments at maybe a lower level, because I came up here and I looked at just marketing when I found out they were really one of the problem child of my variances. All right, I believe I recapped most of the items I wanted to on the report side. Now, another thing is, instead of changing this report prompt and seeing sort of a collapsed view of my company location department or whatever your data warehouse includes, I also want to call your attention to, we have over here to the right, which I'll now thumbtack since I'm calling attention to it, I have more graphical displays and expanded maybe on a few levels, because here might be based on the tree you're using. Like I'm looking at all departments currently, but only for 4100 Denver. But maybe as my CFO, they might want to see more of a graphical view, and I could come up here and open up and reopen the report or run it for any of these lower levels. All right, now is a new feature we added a few months back that based on a customer request. All right, and speaking of existing customer requests, let me show you maybe one thing to begin with. Under the home ribbon, we have this great button here called Feedback and Support. And I call that a red hotline into our support and development teams, because it either might be a product suggestion of new features you would like to see inside Prospero, or these two to the right, issue and support request, do the same. If I come up here and typed in some little message in my email, and if I were to come up here and click submit, then an automatic support ticket gets created. And then we have a whole team members that are tackling that and getting back with you ASAP. I think our fine print says we'll get back with you in about approximately 4 hours business time, but usually it's in minutes. We have somebody tackling that. So I always like to give props and kudos to our support team for being so proactive and professional, having a long tenure like myself of mostly 10, 15 years being in the industry. All right. Passing on some good words from the customer, and thank you. I saw 1 or 2 questions and saying, yep, Derek, I agree. The support team's great. So thanks for that comment, though. 1 or 2 of you just did. All right, I'm continuing to look at the question queue, and a few other questions I did get received I'm going to be addressing here in the next few minutes. And if I failed to, I'll probably the last 5 minutes make sure I'll go through that list, or if not, I'll follow you up on individually, like 1 or 2 I think I'm going to have to find out more information of your request. All right, let me close a few windows here, and let's turn our attention to the budgeting side. All right, now I'm going to take 1 step back. That is, I'm logged in as my end user, that they have limited report access. Like here's report 1, actual budget, or here to the right, a nice little trended report. I did not open a trend, but I could have. But now, secondly, it's that time of year you've asked me to update my budget or forecast. And let's look at that report, because this budget data, including actual and prior year, that's all stored and read from our Prospero data warehouse. We can have automatic integrations, like running every night, every hour, or every 5 minutes based on you wish. We even can run these integrations on demand. Like if I'm at month end, I just did journal entries the last 20 minutes. I can run an automatic integration on demand to update that data very, very fast, literally seconds. All right, but this budget data, I'm not using Excel hell. I'm entering that directly inside Prospero. So I'll take 1 step back. Here's my shortcut to my budget input screen. And really what I set the stage with is the, again, reusable rows, columns, trees. We're not an Excel add-in. And I'm going to open up 3 departments. I could have opened up 100 of them, but I'm really just emphasizing the reusable row, column, or tree. All right, so here's a row/line set on my first department. That is expenses only. I'm now going to click on this button called Reopen the Input, because here in yellow was my heading for Department 100. I'm now going to open up a second Department 300, which also is expenses only, and they share the same row or line template. And how about third and finally, after this opens up, there's my expenses only department. But how about third and finally, I'm going to open up a different department that has revenue and cost of goods sold. And this is simply what we call line overrides, meaning a different row or line template that maybe this department or area of my organization uses. And when this pulls up, this third budget input screen / forecast, I have those two simple building blocks mainly, a line / row, and then secondly a column. And really you can have infinite looks and feels. And as I'm thinking of 30 years and hundreds of customers I've helped with their budget, there's not been a budget I'm not been able to produce inside Prospero for its power and ease. And I'm going to give you 3 examples now of data that's not in my general ledger, but I'm still capturing actuals and budgets 2 levels beyond the general ledger in Prospero's data warehouse. One example of 3 is product 10 motors or product 20 compressors. This is not a segment on a general ledger. We only had company, location, and department. Or secondly, of 3 examples, these statistics like units sold, sales price, or cost per unit, not my general ledger, but hey, same story. I can budget and forecast and record actual of those very easily. And how about third and finally, I'm going to go back to my expenses department. These salaries are driven from details like employee or position. These employees are not in my general ledger. I do not have an employee segment, only location, company, department, and account. All right, awesome. We're going to take one step back and let's look at a few details behind this budgeting and forecasting screen. My first little note to make, and this might be you an end user, all I need is 5 minutes of your time how to log in, how to open a report like I did the first few minutes, or here's how to enter budget data. Now, I like to use colors to represent things, like there at the top in yellow is my header of the year and department, or maybe gray shade, I like to use as an indicator of what you stay away from and do not enter. Like here's all the salaries, do not enter because they're fed to this HR detail tab I'll return to, including head count, hours, full-time equivalency, meaning these statistics also fed through HR. And then how about finally, we have health insurance, payroll tax, benefits. Now notice too, these taper off once people reach their limit, and there's no formulas inside the system. Versus I work with some other Excel competing products, I have to have thousands and hundreds of formulas that they never show you on demonstrations, but I'll show you maybe one simple table where you simply say, hey, here's my federal tax at 6.2%, and then maybe we'll call it 130,000 for this year of 2023. You just have really those 2 fields of the rate and limit, or it could be a fixed amount. Like health insurance might be $700 for family or $800 for high deductible or low deductible. You define those choices I just quoted. And now with that little stage set, meaning one of the largest costs being my staffing, let's go back to the Human Resources tab. And I have flashbacks of 30 years and hundreds of customers. And I paraphrase this usually saying, hey, I usually see 3 common ways people might want to budget or forecast human resources. One, being by their name, like Bob or Sally. Or secondly, it might be by position, like here's a support rep making this many hours, this many average rate. Or third and finally, I'm going to take you back to the revenue and cost of goods sold screen. Sometimes I'll do it statistically based, some of my staffing, especially if it's variable based on some revenue levels, especially manufacturing or some industries like health or higher education. I could probably rattle off several that some positions that might be high turnover and variable in nature, where here is this statistical or driver-based screen, at least to call your attention to one more time. All right, but let's now look back to a few additional fields. Obviously, time permitting, I probably won't be able to talk about all the details we could include, but I can keep this super simple. But we have granularity if you want to get micro on your budgeting. Now, how about just a couple of columns to call your attention to? Is this allocation field? Yeah, we can have maybe different designations for salaried people versus hourly. And then here on the toolbar, I'm showing people mixed, but how about I want to see everybody hourly based or all full-time equivalency based. And then here, as I go back to the main tab, yeah, here's really just the statistic line to have it all summarized for me as I'm maybe reviewing this department, or I might bounce to the report looking at everybody like I did at the beginning of this session. All right, but as I come back to the HR tab, I'll put it back to the mixed in that column for maybe hourly versus salary little designation. Now here's where they start and end. Like this person works the entire year, or this person or position gets hired maybe in period 6. I even, instead of 2 columns, I could even break this out by month, where I see the 12 months because maybe my summer months I have summer interns, or I might be a retailer, maybe the Christmas months, I might want higher hours or full-time equivalents. Here's some pay raises and increases, and let me just highlight our line randomly. So here is Dan making $25K, but I'm going to give him a 10% raise in period 3. And most companies, when I import the staff, let's say at MSX Group, we have 100 people here. It does not matter what payroll system I'm using. I just need a couple columns in my Excel file that I'll import maybe once a year or once a quarter, or based on how frequent you budget, meaning infrequent and rare, I have to do that. But maybe one of my columns would be the pay rate and department they're in, but I also can maybe load, how about a 2% pay raise I'm going to budget for everybody in this particular period. I can load that ahead of time. And if I wanted to get granular, I'll just call your attention to a few other headings here, like bonuses by either $% blank for the bonus period, means I'm going to accrue it, or I could then define specific periods if I want to pay it out based on how you budget, or bonus. Further to the right, I don't have to use this, but available if so. Here's some overtime designations or commission, like for any sales staff. We have some percents, rates, and even on a separate screen where I say what revenue account, singular or plural, like total revenue, all my revenue accounts, so I can get more granular in that regard. And how about last but not least, I'll use myself as an example of these additional columns to the right under the benefit heading. You define the column names and choices. So how about at MSX Group? We have employees in about 10 different states. I live here in California, so whenever Derek gets loaded, he'll have a California next to his name. And then I'll take you maybe to one table that says, hey, here's California's payroll tax, just like Derek has a family. And again, you define these IDs, meaning the left-hand column, and you define the choices in this window. I gave examples of high deductible or low deductible, or maybe workers' comp, choice A, B, C, cell phone, yes or no, 401k / pension, 1% or 2% or 3% contributor. And then when I go full circle, meaning back to my main income statement for this one department I'm in, I see all this data rolled up. There's all my salaries, including some pay raises of that person that starts later in the year, payroll tax. Now this is only one department, but then here is going full circle. Here's my salaries, bonuses, overtime, and I could obviously drill in or look at individual reports as well, as I'm going to go sort of full circle with that. All right. Now I had that one window open already. I just closed it out when I was really just calling out this original report where I was looking at all departments versus the budget. I was looking at a single department. Now let me do one little sidestep. That is, I like to be transparent. Only takes me 1 minute. I want to show you behind the scenes our super easy human resources setup table versus our competition. They'll never probably demonstrate you because it's so ungodly and ugly. But ours is super easy. I'm now logged in as a budget administrator. Here's this one budget I was broadcasting. And let me just give you a little 30-minute training lesson because, hey, here's the line set. When I opened up maybe 50 departments, all those expense departments use this one line set. But then in the override tab, whenever I pulled up department 200, I used a different line set. So here's where I can tailor maybe the different template for, let's say, my manufacturing area versus my consulting area versus my product development side. Maybe I want a different little template that has maybe different accounts and different statistics, but that's how easily we control which department or location uses which budget template and accounts or formulas. And then on Human Resources tab, I'm going to call your attention to what I call a top half and a bottom half. Now the top half, most companies only have 1 or 2 lines here. And the key thing is, hey, here is what general ledger account we expense. And in our demonstration database, we have 2 expenses for salaries. And then the reason why we might have more lines is in case we get questions or want to demonstrate maybe hourly and hourly and maybe different overtime or bonus eligibility, yes or no. But there's maybe some different assumptions that you might want to get more granular based of. But the key thing here is, hey, what expense account do they hit? Now, secondly, and more fun, is down below. Now, these benefits and taxes, I like to summarize by stating they could either be a percent of salary with a limit, like these two, like Medicare has no limit, and both are percent or rate based. But whenever you see the check mark for fixed rate, that is our health insurance common example. And I'm even going to add here a new choice like health. I'm going to insert, I'm just going to call it high deductible, low deductible. And then I can turn on the little check mark and then say, hey, here in the background, which I'll just maybe review with you, here might be X, Y, or Z dollar for our different health insurance coverages. Or you might only have one line here, but you can easily get more granular in this table. And then here is, I'm even going to add here to the right and up above, I'm now showing 5 benefit filters, but I'm just going to click on this up arrow. I'm adding a 6th one, and I'm going to just quote like here, this could be my cell phone. Or another example is I gave for 401k or pension. And then if I were to come up here, and this might be a 1 or 2%, 3% contributor. So there's where I define my different options. And then I'll conclude once again saying, hey, this simple table, there's no formulas inside the system. But if you're looking at competing products, be sure to have them show you this, because I'm sure they will never show it to you. Because I know how ugly those are. All right, let me get off my soapbox here. All right, let me look at the question queue one more time. I think I've answered most that came into the queue, but let me just skim these up and down real fast. I'm secondly looking at my little agenda list, because now that we do have some time remaining, I want to show you some other pain points that most people are faced with in their budgeting reporting world. And one of those is whenever you add a new revenue expense. And let me just also call your attention on this PowerPoint slide that will pass on to everybody that attended this live or registered. But if you're attending it through a recording, jot my name and email down, derek.krebs@msxgroup.com. So if it's a recording, you can easily pause that. Others have heard it. I'd like to also note these 2 slides. This is the first of 2 where we reflected on all those 30 years and hundreds of customers of their current challenges, which is the left-hand column. And then to the right, hey, Prospero features and functionalities that solve those. And I'm not going to really read all those off, but one of those is this 5th item regarding my line set maintenance. Like, hey, whenever I add a new general ledger account, like a new revenue expense, it's very cumbersome, painstaking, and error prone. But with Prospero, we can use what are called summary accounts and the expand feature. And how about secondly, especially for the recording, here's this slide 2 we'll be sure to call your attention to review. And how about finally, maybe hand in hand with that, this was also an introductory slide that we talked about a lot of the Prospero differentiators. Okay, thank you for letting me just broadcast that for the recording again, and let me return and emphasize the efficiencies we have with Prospero whenever I add new revenue expense. I'm now going to open up a report as an administrator. We're going to focus on total expense, which is a summary account. And how about I just added a new account yesterday? I might have 20 different reports that I need to update. Well, great. We have the reusable row column tree, so not Excel hell, so that's one efficiency. Now the second efficiency, and here's the total expenses I just quoted. Let me just show you another quick miscellaneous item or 2. I'm going to show the hidden columns. Not that glamorous, but there's the account number, but I'll turn that off. But then second example, this might be actual quarter to date or year to date where I want to show the individual months of the quarter year without having to have the report be so wide or tall. Now here at the total expenses, I'm showing all the individual accounts above this row for expenses. I, as a power user, I'm going to simply go to the line or column of this report, and let's go to the line set. Well, especially for those FRX and Manage Reporter users, this was the old bad way, where on a detailed report, you had to individually list or select the accounts. But now the good way here is this expenses, and even I'll right-click to vertically list these side by side. Yeah, there's all my different expenses, at least those that have balances, but expenses is only one simple row. And just to repeat, maybe the trainer in me, above this row, I'm showing all the detail. And let me come up here and expand that line set so we can see it further. Because I simply do two things. I'm going to show the detail above or below the row. What zero levels means is show me every individual account. And let's look here to the left. This being maybe a third example to trees today. First was by department, second by company. But I'm going to come up here. Most companies, we only need to create one account tree that has both balance sheet and income statement groupings based on your structure of your financial reports. We even have some out of the box you can leverage and utilize, but in our demonstration, especially balance sheet and cash flow budgeting, I did not show you today, but we have separate webinars on that. Maybe I want to show my cash accounts like depreciation bonus separately. That's why we have a second or third tree. But let me expand this expenses because, yeah, some of your tree levels could use ranges like these two are. Or if not, like our materials and labor, they could be more granular or even a combination of wildcards, secondly ranges, or individual accounts you can have or define these different levels of your report. And let me finish with maybe two or three little emphasizing sentences. One is this one master tree. I'd like to emphasize one master tree that you normally have. If I add a new revenue expense, like this expense in this range, I do not have to update the account tree. Secondly, this line set referencing this summary account called expenses or any other name or ID you want, I do not have to update it. And then third and finally, we saw under the catalog view, I showed you maybe 100 reports inside the system, maybe all using the same line set or row. Awesome. And how about maybe a concluding thought? I'm going to show you behind the scenes, like trees. Let's look at our natural account tree. I'm going to come up here and right click. I'm just going to expand or collapse the entire tree like we have toolbar icons at the top. But let me expand the entire tree. Now we have also great checks and balances system. I'll probably just quote where I can see any missing accounts automatically and the system prevents me duplicates. Now how about this expense range? What's very cool that no other product that I know of does this as robustly or at all. I'm going to right click on top of this summary account for total expenses. Right click. Where am I using that throughout the entire system? And now let me expand this window because great. If I or any of my coworkers in the finance and accounting area decide to change in my account structure, meaning my report structure, I do not have to change all these reports, lines, and columns downstream. So once again, this is our single central master account tree, even though I could have a second or third or fourth if need be. All right, let me also demonstrate if I came up here and inserted a new account, or I'll just do a range here. Like I'll say, here's my demo for today. When I mentioned we could do wildcards and ranges, there's maybe one example of account 6000 through 6099. If I were to click OK, oops, there's maybe one of two checks and balances. Great, we built in the tool to prevent duplicates. And also I can see orphan or missing accounts very easily, which I'll just summarize by that sentence. All right, let me segue away from trees and let me do a last example of when I'm opening up this report. I'm going to reopen it. Now, what's very cool is this one report. Let me focus now on location, which we have yet to look at today together. Here is tree number 1. The all tree automatically created and maintained. Or very cool, I can also open this report up on my divisional tree, what I'll call tree number 2. Or I can also look at the report in tree number 3, because here is, we have maybe an east and south, et cetera, et cetera. But notice here, we have maybe some service departments, like here are services and services in 2 different areas. Yeah, this might be one of my trees where I break it out by geography. But then here is a second tree. There's my services, but then maybe I'm going to roll it up across geographies in this secondary tree. But very cool. I do not have to go to a second, third, or fourth report, which you have to usually do in your world today with FRX Managed Report or most competing products. I'm just going to open up the report with this, how about regional tree? And maybe my manager is the Midwest, which I'm going to do maybe one final sentence on security. But let's open this up regionally based. All right, and then if I were to drill in, which we saw before, maybe my first level is by region 1, 2, 3, maybe my sales analysis, which I won't do for time's sake. But there is one thing or two that I have maybe a couple minutes remaining. I think I've answered all the questions. I want to show you briefly security. Let's go back to my end user, because here is where, when they were at their landing page or quick launch page, and they open up this report, all they saw one is only 2 reports. There's actually about 50 we have in our demonstration system that we can maybe leverage for your implementation. Secondly, we have what are called assignments. So this user, as I'm looking at company, just to remind you, only had access to company 1, or secondly, for the location, only had access to my Denver location. All right, and we simply call that assignments. And I'm now going to take you to one screen as a power user, meaning me in the finance and accounting area. We don't need IT. We love them, but we only need about 1 hour of that time just to install the product, or if we're hosting it cloud-based, we just connect to your data. But maybe that last little window I'll show you as a power user is our security button. And under security, as I just closed some windows down to not clutter, I only have one button here called user definition. Here to the left is roller group 1, roller group 2, roller group 3. And if I expand these users or even click the add button to add maybe a new user or role being a group, under user, I see a few IT people that I saw on their title list that are attending today. Well, a common question we get is, hey, can you use our Windows Network Security? By all means. Or can we use our Azure Microsoft Single Sign-In? Yes, by all means. And there's at least one confirming button to do or illustrate that up above. That was just maybe an IT word or two. That was a question I saw earlier in the queue. So thanks, and there's my response to that. Now, the second thing is, let's look at that one user called Manager 1 that Derek was picking on. And 2 final little words of thought on security. One being assignments. So for Manager 1, we'll call it Bob or Sally. Here is Company 1, only Denver. If I click on the Insert button, here is where either I could wildcard or I could choose the All. And I could get more granular because maybe they get only Company 1 and 2. But usually I'll create a node in my tree that rolls up Company 1 and 2 together. That way I get the best of both worlds, a nice little summary reports, and also for my security designations. And really the last little thing is the same story here on location, department, or other segments you have inside Prospero, even non-general ledger segments you might want to include in the data warehouse. How about, let me pick on Midwest, all the locations agree with the 4. Great, I can see it. All right, awesome. Now, as I wind down, I'll just say a big thank you for those that are attending us live or later through recording. This again was Derek Krebs, Senior Consultant Broadcasting. So if you have any follow-up questions, there's my contact information. And maybe one additional invite for maybe a recording you might want to later see, which we'll be sure to pass on to everybody that registered or attended today, including an offer for a one-on-one demonstration. Everybody was muted today, but hopefully I fielded all your questions. But if I missed any, just ping me. And then maybe lastly, we also have a nice little free trial version of Prospero to kick the tires and test it out for yourself to avoid that $1 million mistake. Many come us to it later that, oh, a competing product didn't meet our need, it's overpromised. So thank you one and all. I'm going to look one final time in the question queue. Otherwise, I see a couple of thank yous that came in, so thank you as well. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day and reach out at any time. Thank you for attending. Goodbye.